Hello, good evening and welcome to Newsfirst in Focus. This week's program is going to be all about the European Union, its development assistance with Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's relationship with the EU, especially in the aftermath of GSP Plus being granted to the country. Joining us on the show this evening is Ambassador Mark. He's the head of delegation for the EU mission here in Sri Lanka. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us on Newsfirst in Focus. Let me start by asking you, in the past decade, from 2005 to 2015, the European Union's assistance to Sri Lanka, including humanitarian assistance and development assistance, has totaled more than 700 million euros, almost 800, 760 I believe exactly. Are you satisfied with how this assistance has been put to use over the decades, and where would you like to see improvement?
Thank you, first of all, for having invited me here to your show. I would say that, generally speaking, we have been satisfied by the way we have been spending the EU funds in this country for, indeed, humanitarian assistance aid when there was the post-tsunami period, reconstruction, and so forth. And also the part of development cooperation that we could launch in the end of this decade. However, there has been a frustration, I must tell you, because under the previous regime we were not able to cooperate as we would have wanted it at government level and with the central authorities. We had to do it at district level and also with NGOs, and therefore, in a way, there was a slowing down in the last period before the new government came in place in what we did together with the government. The good news is that since 2015 we have really relaunched the whole cooperation process. We have created a working group on cooperation, development cooperation, that is chaired jointly by us and the Sri Lankan government. And since then, there are a number of projects that are in the pipeline and that I think would be very useful for the country. One of them that I would like to mention, because it's still an area where I think there can be improvements, is the support to modernize agriculture in your country. We know that agriculture represents a significant part of the activities in the country. Something like 80% of the people are working or related closely or more remotely to the agricultural sector. And I think it's important to ensure three elements. And that's the reason why we have been promoting that project. It's a 30 million euro project that has been signed already in terms of financial agreement with the government. Three areas that we want to focus on in terms of achievements: resilience, better diversity of a bigger diversity of the products, and also, of course, the modernization in general.
The EU also has a multi-annual indicative program for Sri Lanka 2014 to 2020, for which a sum of 210 million rupees has been allocated, with the focal sector being integrated rural development. This is also in addition to rural development in the central and Uva provinces. Why the focus specifically on rural development? What interest does the EU have?
I would like to correct you. We are speaking not of rupees but of euros, which makes quite a big difference, I must say. Well, what I was telling you previously was that with the previous government we were not able to spend all the envelope of the multi-annual indicative program that you mentioned, where indeed the envelope is around 200 million euros. So we have not been committing, far from that, all the money. So we still need to revise the MIP in order to address, I would say, the changes that took place in the country since 2015. Obviously, we will maintain a strong focus on agriculture, but it will be in a more integrated way, looking more at sustainable development objectives, at environment-friendly measures also, at cross-cutting issues such as, for instance, gender mainstreaming, issues that are important in the context of SDG, and also because they are related to certain situations such as single households, families, and livelihoods. So we will continue to focus on agriculture, but I would say that the new element will be the creation of a second sector, and that's the sector of good governance and reconciliation, where obviously to the political needs and the reality of the country, this will be done in full cooperation with the government. We have been sending here to Colombo and to the rest of the country assessment missions to be carefully looking at what should be the priorities that make sense, bearing in mind also that there are other donors and that we need to avoid duplication of efforts.
Ambassador, when you talk about good governance, one of the concerns for many civil society actors, for citizens in general, is that the pace of reform has slowed down. For financial accountability, the government promised a national audit bill, which is supposed to be introduced within the first 100 days of this government, the government of President Maithripala Sirisena being elected. The Right to Information Act came much later than anticipated, and now you've got a counter-terrorism framework which might undermine what was done before, the legislation that was passed before. For the EU, what are the areas of concern when it comes to good governance in Sri Lanka?
Well, there are a number of areas of concerns, but most importantly, what we want to do together with your government is to be able to support also the reform process. Let's take one or two examples. You mentioned the need to improve the financial management, the public financial management of the country. We fully agree. By the way, we are not the only ones. There's also the IMF who wants the same thing, and the World Bank. So what are we going to do then? Well, we thought that in order to provide support, it would be very important to enhance the capacity of how not only the Parliament, because they are a key actor in looking at how the money is being spent, but also how the structures, the administrative structures of your government will be reinforced to ensure that modern ways of accountability, of transparency will be put forward, and this is something that we are going to do through our annual program that will be starting for this year. It's the AAP 2017, Annual Action Program 2017. It's in the course of being adopted by our headquarters, but the good news is that we already got the political green light, and that we have a very good cooperation with the Ministry of Finance and also with the World Bank, who will be our implementing partner.
Ambassador, we'll be going in for a short commercial break. When we come back, I want to focus more on the issue of public financial management and the interest of the EU in seeing this accomplished in Sri Lanka to a certain extent, or to seeing progress in Sri Lanka. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Biz First in Focus. We're talking about the EU's relationship with Sri Lanka. Our guest is the head of delegation for the European mission to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Ambassador Mark, thank you very much for joining us on the program once again. We were talking about the annual action program.
Yes.
And the EU's interest in progress in public finance management in Sri Lanka. Tell us a little bit more about the AAP. How can the EU really support Sri Lanka's reform efforts? What sort of technical expertise will be granted through the AAP?
Well, first of all, this project will amount to 8 million euros, and it will serve precisely to enhance the capacity of the various structures that are already in place in the country, to be more accountable and to have also, I would say, the adequate training to follow the new methods that exist in other more developed countries, such as the European member states. One example that I would like to give is the fact that we'll be also looking at how to improve, on the request of the Sri Lankan Parliament, the way they are able to monitor the way the money is being spent by your government and by the various departments.
We'll come to the matter of trade now. The GSP Plus trade concession was granted to Sri Lanka recently. Sri Lanka is also working on enhancing trade with other global partners. There are a lot of free trade agreements that are in the pipeline. We read in the newspapers last week that the Prime Minister had said that the UK had promised that the GSP Plus concession would be extended by the UK post-Brexit. For the EU, when it comes to Sri Lanka as a trading partner, how really is Sri Lanka viewed? Sri Lanka as a trading partner. Right now, it's more of a reliance because of the GSP Plus. Where would you like to see Sri Lanka progress when it comes to areas of internal trade, for ease of doing business for European companies?
Well, I think that the starting point is that the GSP Plus scheme is there to encourage exports to be enhanced and developed, so as to ensure that, for instance, the deficit that you have got in terms of export and import balance is being reduced, and also that you will be able to enhance the competitivity of your industries and of your exporters in general, not only towards Europe but also towards, I would say, your regional partners. So the free trade agreements that are being developed or, let's say, refined for the time being around this part of the region, I think are good ideas that go in the same direction as what we would like to do. What we try also to do is that GSP Plus is providing zero tariffs. So that's a big advantage. But we all know that it's not sufficient just to have zero tariffs access. What you also need is to have small and medium enterprises, more and more small and medium enterprises that are able to export their products towards high-level markets where the demand and the request of the consumers are rather big. And this is supported also by standards, technical standards, that the small and medium enterprises in Sri Lanka need to be ready to adjust to. That's also the reason why we are having a big project together with the government, your government, and implemented by the International Center for Trade, a UN agency body, where the idea is precisely to see how we can facilitate, in very practical terms, the access of small and medium enterprises of your country towards other parts of the world, including the EU. That's I would say, what we are trying to do to improve the access to our market. On the other hand, what we also would like to do is to increase the capacity of European companies to come and start activities here in Sri Lanka. And that's the reason why I was very happy to be able to relaunch, together with the Sri Lankan authorities, the so-called EU-Sri Lanka investor dialogue, where we are focusing on how to get rid of certain of the problems that our companies, the EU companies, have got when they want to establish themselves here and when they want to develop their activities here. This is a very concrete dialogue that takes place, I would say, on a 3-month basis, where you have got a number of issues that are on the table coming from our side, and where on the other side there's a coordination, a very good coordination, by the way, from your ministries to try to answer, to give answers and to solve the issues.
There was talk about the Sri Lankan government looking at a more liberal visa entry system for investors, professionals connected to foreign investments. Is this an area of concern for the EU?
It is, and I would say not only for the EU, by the way, for all those who want to have a certain guarantee in time that there will be no problem with the visas. We still would like to have clarification on that point. Initially, what we read was that it would be a 5 years visa More recently, in this context that we had in the context of the dialogue, it was mentioned that it would only be 2 years. Obviously, we would prefer 5 years, and this is something we will follow up with the government.
When you're talking about international trade politics, this last week, the attention of the entire globe was fixed on Beijing in China, where the One Belt, One Road summit was happening. Sri Lanka was also an active participant at this summit, which did not see the participation of Sri Lanka's largest neighbor, India. India raised several concerns about debt burdens for developing countries. For the EU, is it concerning that countries like Sri Lanka are getting closer to China and this One Belt, One Road initiative?
I think it's not for us to make a judgment on the political direction that this government is taking in terms of trying to get closer from a trade point of view with big countries. Obviously, what we would prefer is, and I think that's also what is behind the approach of the Prime Minister and his government, is not to put the Sri Lankan eggs all into the same basket. This was the case during the previous regime. I think that there are lessons to be learned about that. And what I see is, on the contrary, quite an equilibrated approach to not do the same mistake.
Ambassador, when we come back from this short commercial break, we'll be talking about the future of Sri Lanka-EU relations. Has Sri Lanka successfully spread its eggs among many baskets? Welcome back to Biz First in Focus. We're in conversation with the Ambassador of the European Union in Sri Lanka, the head of delegation of the EU mission to Sri Lanka, Ambassador Mark. We're talking about the EU's relationship with Sri Lanka. Let's look toward the future. Sri Lanka is looking at attracting a lot more foreign direct investment in the years to come. We spoke earlier about how liberalizing visa requirements for professionals connected to investment projects would go a long way towards attracting more investors here. What more is on the EU's wish list of things that Sri Lanka can do to attract more EU investors?
Well, I think that a major element of progress that could be made is around the tender procedures. Because if there is not a transparent and non-discriminatory procedure in the way foreign investors are being handled when they are applying for tenders, then it's quite discouraging. And to be frank, it also opens the way to suspicion about corruption going on. And this is the last thing that investors want to have, the uncertainty about where they are going to put their money. And that's the reason why we have been talking quite a lot to the government about the improvements that could be made in that area, under various angles. Not only the putting in place the procedures, but implementing them in a proper way, and also ensuring that there is no hurdle about the complexity of the procedures. They need to be more transparent, easier to be understood. They shouldn't be used to disguise a way of excluding certain companies.
We're talking about investment, EU investment in Sri Lanka. You've only been here for 9 months now. But in your time here so far, Ambassador, have you seen any areas of potential interest that European corporations would like to invest in?
Well, look, I think there are a number of areas where we, the European Union, we have got a competitive edge. To give you one example, medical products. Everything that is linked to instruments that are linked to medical area, we have got a very strong point there. IT obviously also, although we have got to compete here with India. I think there are a number of areas where we could be very successful here, provided that the right environment is totally in place. I understand that there are a lot of efforts being made by this government. we mentioned the visa, the granting of long-term visas. We have still got certain areas of concerns when it comes to, I would say, customs issues, the way certain products are being taxed. Also, more specifically about the luxury vehicle way duties are being presented. I think this is part of the ongoing debate that we have in the context of that framework called the EU-Sri Lankan Investor Dialogue, where we raise these issues. And where we raise also, apart from the more, how would I put it, policy issues, also complaints of European companies, or concerns, let's put it that way. It's not always complaints, it's sometimes strong concerns. And very recently, in our last dialogue meeting that was on the 3rd of May, we also allowed a slot for the European companies to be present at the meeting with the Sri Lankan ministries and with the EU heads of missions and representatives here in Colombo. And those that are based, unfortunately, not in Colombo but in New Delhi, come specifically for that dialogue.
Ambassador, one of the areas that Sri Lanka, where we're seeing a real boom, one of the sectors of the Sri Lankan economy that is booming is tourism. And a large number of inbound tourists coming into the country are European, are from EU countries. Are there any opportunities there for EU companies to sort of explore investment opportunities in Sri Lankan tourism?
Obviously. I would say that you have got an extraordinary country with so much different regions in the same country that it's sometimes a bit frustrating for tourists who come for a week, let's say, not to be able to explore the whole country. So if the government and if also the private sector is able to diversify the type of programs that it can offer to tourists, that would be a tremendous advantage, because you have got different type of tourists, let's face it. You've got those that are interested by lying on the beach and maybe diving from time to time, enjoying Nordic sports, and you have got others who are more cultural oriented, who want to visit the ancient parts of and cities of your country, who like the nature. And there's so much to offer in terms of diversity that certainly, yes, there is a strong potential still. But what I would like to say is you should be careful not to do it to the detriment of keeping the quality of your country alive. I don't want to cite any countries in the region that have perhaps been not very prudent in the way they have been handling the tourist activities so far, and to what extent they have not created the kind of negative effect for a certain type of tourism. So diversity of the type of tourism is important, but also the way you are going to be able to preserve what is really the heart of your country and the way you can offer it to the tourist.
So basically to be sustainable in
sustainability is the key word.
Ambassador, one final question before I let you go. You've got a couple more years and as part of your term in Sri Lanka, what does the future hold for the EU's relations with Sri Lanka?
I'm very positive about the way it is developing since 2015. I am quite sure that in the coming years it will be even better in terms of quality and also in terms of mutual understanding of how we will cooperate more closely. There has been a tremendous change, and I'm very encouraged by the very positive attitude of the government towards the EU. And on our side, what I would like to say is that we are not only looking at economic opportunities, far from that. We are also wanting to make sure that through our efforts, the results that we are going to be able to get will come to the benefit of all the Sri Lankan people, not only of a certain part of the population, but for all of your people.
Ambassador Mark, thank you very much for joining us on BizFirst in Focus. It's been a pleasure talking to you. So there you have it. The EU's interest is to ensure that whatever development assistance, whatever partnerships are engaged in the future with Sri Lanka, the benefits flow to all the people.